I thought I was out of luck when they canceled a local carnival this year. I love stuffing my face with carnival food like deep fried candy bars and corn dogs, and then going on extreme rides that fling upside down so fast that parts of you don't catch up until an hour later. There's nothing like a high-speed tumble with a gut full of grease to test whether you really have a strong stomach. So far, I've passed every challenge. Nothing makes me sick. But last year, some 40-year-old guy who watched too many action movies tried to jump from one horse to another on the merry-go-round and broke his leg. He sued the town. He didn't win, but the town spent a ton of money on lawyers and refused to allow another carnival. I thought all was lost until Mrs Skantz came stomping up my porch this morning.
"Oh, Ryan! Hey, are you there?"
he shouted. He banged on the door yelling, bang, 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 just in case I didn't realize someone was seeking my attention. "What's up?" I asked when I got to the door.
"There's a carnival over in Lakewood,"
he said.
"My mom's gonna drop me off. Wanna come? Don't be a bum, chum."
I would have instantly shouted yes, but Buzzy's kind of hard to hang out with. He reminds me of those comedians who shout everything instead of talking. Unlike the comedians though, he isn't funny, just loud. On the other hand, a good carnival is so loud I might not even be able to hear Buzzy. "Sure, I'll go."
"Ba-boom!"
he shouted, thrusting his arm like he had just won the Olympic gold medal.
"We're on. We'll pick you up at 7, not 11. It'll be heaven."
He ran off the porch, making race car noises. Oh, what have I done? I told myself it would be fine. The memory of the funnel cake, cotton candy, and super sweet lemonade eased my worries. Buzzy swung by at 7 that evening. I was waiting on the porch. I could have been waiting inside a locked safe buried in a pit in my backyard, and I wouldn't have missed him.
"Ryan, we're here! Get in gear, or I'll kick your rear."
Did I mention Buzzy thought he was a hip-hop star? I got in the car and thanked Mrs Skantz for the ride. She nodded and turned the radio up, real loud. Lakewood was 30 minutes, or 120 shout, trip. But at the end of it, sure enough, there was a carnival, full of food, rides, and games.
"Have a good time,"
Mrs Skantz said as she pulled up near the entrance.
"I'll be back for you at 10. Remember to stay away from the food. You know how that makes you hyper."
She handed Buzzy $5. That's not gonna go far, I thought. Everything in the carnival is expensive.
"The sausage!"
Buzzy screeched as he leaped from the car. He went running towards the first booth. Sunny's super sloppy sausage sandwiches. They must be good sandwiches. There was a mob of customers. Buzzy ducked under some elbows, dodged around a couple of people, and disappeared from sight. He popped back into view, seconds later with a sandwich in his hands. By the time I reached him, he had already devoured half of it.
"A bite?"
he asked, thrusting the chewed end toward my face.
It tastes just right. Pure delight."
No thanks. I stood back for the 12 seconds it took him to gobble down the remaining half. I liked sausage, but I wanted something sweeter. As I walked away from the booth, I saw the sausage seller glaring at Buzzy.
"Rides!"
Buzzy shouted. He sprinted toward the midway. I stopped at the booth and bought some ride tickets, and then followed him to the scrambler.
You go ahead,"
he said. That was weird. I gave the 90-year-old guy who ran the scrambler my ticket and climbed into one of the open cars. While the guy was checking that everyone was strapped in, Buzzy snuck past the gate and slipped into the next seat to me. So that's how he planned to stretch his $5. What a slime ball. I wondered whether he'd stolen that sausage too. It turned out that the scrambler was a big mistake. Spinning in the air with a shouter who still has bits of super sloppy sausage sandwich in his mouth isn't a great thing to do if you're wearing a white t-shirt.
"Ooh, another ride?"
Buzzy asked when he staggered off the scrambler. Let's stay outside. Don't try to hide. In a while, I want to get some food. And I didn't want to get into trouble if he tried to sneak onto another ride. I followed my nose to the funnel cake stand and bought myself a sugar-covered mass of deep-fried happiness. Just as I was picking up my plate from the counter, Buzzy grabbed my shoulder and shouted,
"Open wide! I found the coolest ride!"
The jolt sent my funnel cake sliding off the paper plate into the dirt. As I was wondering whether I could pick it up and brush it off, 2 little kids ran right over it.
"Let's go!"
Buzzy shouted, tugging at me.
You're so slow. Can't say no.
He dragged me over to a really rundown looking ride at the far end of the midway. The sign in front, made of large individual flaking red letters that dangled from the crossbar above the entrance, read, Wild Blue Yonder. The Y was hanging at an angle like it was ready to drop off. The rusted ride might have been blue a long time ago, but it sure didn't look very wild. It was basically a small jet with 2 seats on a shaft that could swing in different directions. The jet itself looked like it could rotate on the end of the shaft. Not bad, but I really didn't want to be next to Buzzy when I was being shaken all over the place. Scratchy music played from somewhere at the base of the ride. I recognized the song. It was the Air Force theme about flying off into the wild blue yonder. Okay, so the name sort of made sense. A dozen kids were lined up waiting their turn. There was a gate right inside the entrance. And kids moved inside the gate after they gave the guy their ticket. You go ahead, I told Buzzy.
Okay. Hey, look!
He pointed over my head. As I turned, he stuck his foot out in front of me and shoved me from behind. I let out a shout as I tripped and fell into the only mud puddle in the whole carnival. A couple of people came over and helped me up, including the guy who ran the ride. He looked a lot like the guy who ran the sausage booth. Maybe they were brothers. After I got to my feet, I saw Buzzy at the front of the line. He'd hopped the gate. The guy glanced at Buzzy, but didn't say anything. He just let him on. Before the next kid could get in, the guy said, "One at a time." The ride started out slowly, and then picked up speed. In a moment, it was really swooping around. It looked cool enough that I almost wished I was on it. Then again, I could always ride it after Buzzy got off.
It's not mild!
Buzzy shouted as he swooped past. I noticed that the letters in the name shook. On his next swoop, Buzzy shouted,
You're such a child!
The letters shook again, but not all of them. I realized that it was just the I, L, and D. That was weird. They bounced like someone had given the support post a hard kick. As Buzzy shot past again, he yelled,
This is wild!
The letters in wild shook, then fell off the crossbar, one at a time. The W barely missed the head of a kid who was standing in the line. Buzzy was now riding the Blue Yonder.
Me!
He shouted as he swooped by.
I'm riding!
Next swoop, he pointed at me.
You're not!
The N and the O in Blue Yonder shook. There wasn't a T. I wondered whether letters would fall only if they matched the whole word. Not that it mattered. As long as nobody was standing underneath the sign, nobody would get hurt. Buzzy ran through a half-dozen rhymes for not, and then shouted,
You don't have a clue!
As the L, U, and E shook, my eyes looked at the sign. I'd always been good with word games. What I saw made my knees buckle. I could feel the blood drain from my face. I realized that Buzzy's words might not matter a lot. Don't say that, I thought. But I knew it was coming. He was running out of other words.
The ride's not through!
I wondered if there was any way I could get him to be quiet.
You belong in a zoo!
Just the O shook.
Go buy a canoe!
I glanced at the ride operator. Maybe the ride would end before Buzzy said the wrong thing. I'd hope so. But the guy was standing there with his arms folded across his chest, like he was willing to let Blue Yonder run all day. Buzzy pointed at me and screamed,
I'm better than you!
Oh no, you! I looked at the sign. The Y fell first, leaving Blue Yonder. The U fell, leaving B-L-E Yonder. Finally, the O dropped. The sign now read B-L Ender. The crossbar was still shaking enough to make the letters slide together. Buzzy was no longer riding the Blue Yonder. He was strapped into the blender. I hoped nothing else would change, but I sorta knew what was coming. The jet tilted so its nose was pointing straight up. The wings folded down. The tail turned into a blade that pulled into the bottom of the jet. I flinched as the whirring sound ripped through the air. I heard Buzzy scream.
Help!
His scream was followed by sounds I didn't want to identify. The whir slowed and then stopped. The ride, still shaped like a blender, lowered itself to the ground and settled into the base. I heard a liquidy sort of slurping, like when water runs down a half-clogged drain. I noticed a thick hose attached to the base. I followed it with my eyes, though I really didn't have to. I was pretty sure I knew where it led. The hose, snaking its way among the dozen of cables and wires that crossed the carnival ground, ran all the way to the rear of Sonny's super sloppy sandwich booth. I guess Buzzy was heading there himself. I wasn't in the mood for any more rides, and I really wasn't in the mood for any food. I headed to the parking lot to wait for Mrs. Skantz. It was going to be kind of hard to explain about Buzzy. I guess I was sorry we'd come to the carnival, but I was pretty glad I didn't eat the sausage.